Bud, how are you?
Good, Albert. How are you today, my man?
Doing great, doing great.
Awesome, awesome. Well, today we're here with Albert, and I'm going to do my best, Albert, to butcher your name. So, because I gave Harry a promise that I would release him from butchering anybody else's name. So, Albert Ciuksza, how am I
Ciuksza.
doing?
Yeah,
There we go.
Ciuksza. Tough Polish name.
So Albert is a seasoned advisor in the leadership transition world. Albert and I have been friends. He's the expert that has written Stepping Up Without Stepping in It. It is your go-to guide for managing succession planning. And to me, we talk in the industry a ton about how succession planning is focused around, hey, family business succession planning. But Albert, that's not the only thing that we're real focused on with succession planning either. There's a huge related around like, hey, I've got a knowledge transfer my seasoned veterans who might not be family businesses onto the next group as well. So there's that component too that we need to focus on too. So that's kind of the framing of the discussion today, Albert. Is like, how do we not just do succession planning internally with family members, but also how do we manage succession planning for our knowledge transfer between team members, right? And that's your expertise. That's where you live every day.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So a couple things just as you're talking about it. So if we look at the baby boom generation, and so those are the folks who were born between 1946 and 1964, you may have heard the data point that they're hitting retirement age at about 10,000 people a day. Two other things just kind of bring that a little bit more to light, or three other things. One is we're in peak boomer. So between 2024 and 2027, that number hits 11.5. Every boomer will have hit that age by the time 2030 comes around. And to give an idea of like the scale of how large that is, if you took a year's worth of folks hitting retirement age and they actually retired, you would wipe out in a year the entire workforce in the state of Arizona. Like it is a lot of people. So to your point, this isn't just mom and dad to son and daughter. This is across enterprises, a monumental shift, no doubt.
So, from your perspective, with all the professional business that you do and advising clients that you work with, not just inside this industry, but also in other industries that are having the same challenges too, because like you said, this is across the board.
This is
What
everywhere.
are one of the key things that smart operators are doing to maintain and retain that knowledge and transfer that knowledge from one generation to the next, and from one team member who might be that seasoned veteran guru into that next fleet of folks that are going to lead these organizations?
Sure. So it's really about intentionality and doing the work to get there. And I know that sounds maybe a little bit simple, but it's not. In fact, if you look at research, when you're looking at the most critical generational shift from boomers who are retiring, largely transitioning to the millennial aged folks. So those are people who are born between 80 and 2000 or so. The real concern there is I'll shorten the double blind whatever research language into they don't like each other. So in the situation where we need to have really good knowledge transfer between these two groups, it's not really happening. Boomers don't necessarily want to be having those conversations, and millennials are a little bit uncomfortable with those discussions, or they're so willing to kind of kick that person out of the seat. They may not recognize the value they're bringing to the organization or the things that they know, really risking some of what that institutional knowledge is. One point I will share is in the research I did when I was writing the book, the extent to which successors maintain a relationship with the predecessor after that predecessor exits has a significant impact on the success of the business long term. So it is crucial for people who are stepping into those succession roles and taking over the organization to maintain that relationship and not make it completely transactional because you're going to need that person's advice.
So it sounds like most successful transitions are connected to when that predecessor has a connection with the successor, and they maintain that outside of the workplace too. It's
For
not
sure.
just transactional.
Yep, for sure. No doubt.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Why do you think that some of the main things of where our seasoned veterans might not be willing to open up and have that knowledge transfer conversations? What's one of the big hangups you think emotionally? Because it's more than likely emotional rather than
It is always emotional. So you're absolutely right. So a couple things to think about the context of what those people have spent most of their careers doing. So if you look at the timeline between 1950 and 2000, that was the largest expansion of per capita human wealth in human history. It's the most that has ever happened ever. If you were an 18-year-old oldest baby boomer, put $100 in the Standard and Poor 500 when you turned 18, by the end of last year, that $100 was worth $32,000. For the most part, it's a generation that certainly has had its bumps and bruises, no doubt economically, but has had a 10% year over year or 10% year over year growth for the most part over their lifespan. So what they know is success, and that has been a lot of what their identity is. And so, if I were to summarize the predecessor experience, and the longest chapter in the book is about how to navigate the predecessor, and that's where I think successors make the mistake. We tend not to bring the level of emotional intelligence that we need to. The best way I'd summarize it is for those of you who might be college football fans or aware of college football. Florida State's old head coach years ago was Bobby Bowden once was being needled by some press folks, and they asked him when he was going to retire, and he said, "There's only one big event after retirement, and I ain't ready for that." And I think if we recognize, right? I mean, this is the hard part. If we recognize that this isn't just a career change, this isn't even just, hey, I get a lottery ticket because I finally get to sell my business and buy the beach house in Florida and sip Coronas on the back deck or whatever. It's really a shift in identity, and that in itself is a grief process. It's a sense of loss. And for successors, what I see they tend to get tripped up on is they don't recognize that this is a sense of loss. These are people who are quite literally grieving maybe their identity and career, but also likely a recognition that they're starting to hit the maybe 18th green of their life, not just their careers. And I think we sometimes as successors take that a little too lightly.
there's a morbid nature to it.
For sure.
There's a morbidity to it. It's a challenge. One of the ones that I've had experience with challenging too is as you pointed out, I'm not ready for what happens next. I'm not ready to die.
Yep.
There's that morbidity nature that we have to get through. Transactionally wise, there is a couple very key tactics you talk about in the book that you wrote here. And one of them is like an unequal playing field that can happen between predecessor and successors as well.
Yep.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So there are inevitable conflicts between the successor and the predecessor. And it happens, again, so much of this conversation tends to be around family. And one of the reasons why I did the research the way I did is I dug into corporate transitions. I dug into privately held businesses that had no family connections. I really tried to get a wide swath. And what I found was in every one of those scenarios, except for one, that there was a conflict or series of conflicts, and I kind of refer to them in the book as wildfires, and I talk about them that way because there are two things. There's sparks. What are the things that actually start the fire? And then where do those sparks fall? So if you have really dry brush, it's more likely to burst into flames than if you had rain for 2 weeks, right? That'll be safely that spark will fall to the ground. The conditions are the stage of grief that predecessor is going through. And there's a whole lot of information on what different stages create what dangers, almost like one of those Smokey Bear signs at a national park or something, where it goes from, you're okay to extreme, right? It has that range. But the sparks often are in our control. And so to I think what you're alluding to, there are a few things that tend to be the case. One is kind of a version of the prisoner's dilemma. So if you've ever heard of that kind of game theory thing about two prisoners and they get different sentences, whether one of them or the other one confesses versus stays quiet, whether they both do one of those activities. The challenge is the predecessor. It's in succession it's one of the last places where there's knowledge disparity, right? That predecessor knows more about the business. They may have access to information you simply don't have access to. And it's not something you can pull out of AI. It's not something you can Google. Stuff is unique to the business. And so there's an information disparity there, and that can create some trust challenges between the successor and the predecessor. There are a few others that I think are pretty key. One being this idea of kind of how we learn and how we kind of develop as people. We start out as kind of uninformed ineptitude. We don't know what we don't know. Feels great, right? And at some point, we figure out we don't know what we're doing. And I don't know about you, but anytime I'm doing something, I don't care if it's like, playing a sport or, doing something in my professional career. If I'm not any good at it, I get mad, right? Or I feel uncomfortable. And I kind of refer to that as agonizing awareness. It is so painful to know that you're there. Then you go into confident capability. I'm comfortable. I know that I can do it. And then at some point it becomes effortless expertise where it's automatic. And so, the hard part, going back to some of the questions you were asking about that knowledge transfer, one of the reasons why knowledge transfer is so hard is some of it is so automatic. That person doesn't even know what to tell you that you need to know until you either ask the question or the situation comes up. The challenge in all of this and why it's so painful is everyone in succession is in agonizing awareness. The predecessors probably never really thought about how to retire before, how to hand off their business before. That successors probably never really had to step in and take true ownership of making those hard leadership decisions. So all of those things are inherently emotional, and they're just kindling for those wildfires that can pop up between successors and predecessors.
What I love, Albert, about the book that you talk through is the 13 predecessor archetypes.
Yep.
And they are a great outline for anybody who's reading the book that gives you a real story of what these experiences have been like. Some of them have been modeled after real life, actual stories of
every one of them. Yep, every one of them.
Talk to us about one or two or a few of the archetypes that you love the most.
Sure.
To the audience today.
Sure, there are a couple. So one of my favorites is the arsonist firefighter. So I know all of us have seen the local news story where there's a string of house fires or something, and then they figure out that the local fireman was bored, started the fire so he could go be the hero, right? We've all seen that. I have often seen a challenge of the arsonist firefighter where that predecessor ends up starting the blaze in order to then swoop in and validate that they're needed. So they're so uncomfortable. They're so somewhere in that grief process where they're in denial or they're bargaining or they're really struggling with the process that they still feel they need to be validated. And so they'll swoop in and make that decision. And worst case I've seen is somebody who built a perfect succession process with a great succession team and had a business he was ready to sell for about 25 million or something along those lines. At the last minute, pulled the deal. Within 4 months of all of that time and investment into bringing in that executive team, basically every one of them was gone, installed family members as the new executive team. And the latest update is all those folks have now left, and he has now hired a completely new executive team. But regardless, that business is worth probably about 40% of what it was prior. Another one that's a personal favorite, and I think you and I have talked about this one, is the seagull, which is, if you've ever heard seagull management, it's swooping in, crapping on everything, and then leaving everyone else to have to clean up the mess, right? And what you'll sometimes see is predecessors aren't quite ready to let go, but they're not exactly sticking around either. So they'll maybe make some lifestyle decisions, or they won't be much in the business. They'll come in, they'll see two or three things, decide there's something wrong, mess everything up, tell everyone to fix it, and then leave, completely distracting everyone from the work that they were doing that was productive, and without maybe the context to understand why that decision was made. So just a couple examples of the 13 in there, but they get from humorous to scary depending on the stories.
If you're going to talk to one of the predecessors in the room listening today,
Sure.
tell the story about I'm going to retire and then I need to move on, but I moved to the country club board and I have
Yeah.
to focus on the chefs.
Yep. Love it.
Chicken salad.
Yep. So so I'm in the Pittsburgh region, and there is a very famous, at least in our regional area, guy named Henry Hillman rather. And Henry built this insane business and became a billionaire, and stayed in the philanthropic community basically until the day he died. And he died into his mid to late 80s. And, someone asked him, why are you still doing it? Why are you still going to the office? You could be golfing with your friends. You could be, hanging out at a Caribbean island all the time. Why are you doing it? And he said, I didn't want to become a potato salad guy. And so what does that mean? He goes, look, folks like us, we work hard, we have a little bit of success, and then at some point we decide to retire. And, we don't really have the same stuff that we get to do, right? We're not active the same way in terms of our professional careers, but we still have the skill set. And so we go golfing, early tea time. We're back at the 19th hole having lunch. And, all of a sudden, like, I don't like the potato salad. And then I'm asking my friends, what do you think? Yeah, I'm not a big fan. And then I take that 30, 40, 50 years of career experience where I've cracked heads and been successful, and I turn it into getting the board on board with firing the head chef and all the political machinations. And then we hire the new person. I get like deep involved, like this was a 9-figure acquisition in order to rehire the chef because I didn't like the potato salad. And he said, I just didn't want to spend my life wasting it that way. And that's one of those sticks in the back of my head as I think about transition. I'm trying to do it ahead of time. And as I kind of share with a lot of the predecessors that I talk to, they need to find the thing that they're running to and that they're deeply excited about. It's like any job transition. If you're running away from something rather than towards something, you're likely to make a mistake, and it's likely to be much more painful than it needed to be.
That elegantly ties back into what you said earlier about people who have relationships as a successor with the predecessor, and they maintain that relationship post the transaction or post the exit. That means that there's something else for that predecessor to do. And they may have moved on to something additional, philanthropic, or even another role in consulting in some way, but also having that one-on-one relationship back and forth with their successor is a part of that, avoiding the potatoes, becoming the potatoes.
Absolutely. It's crucial. It's crucial.
Do you have any good framework? Well, let's take one quick pit stop for anybody listening out in the audience too. We've got a Q&A feature. If you want to ask any questions to any of the panelists and or to Albert right now, feel free to chime in. We've got about 10 minutes left with Albert here. Albert, let's move and kind of talk about process.
Sure.
What would be the best SOP? Where do we want to move? If this is vibing with folks, they're like, man, I got to put some processes in place to maintain institutional knowledge, or maybe I'm a predecessor at the top and I need to do some family planning.
Yeah.
And I want to make it a process, not an event.
Yep.
What does that look like?
Yeah, no, that's great. There are a couple of don'ts, and then I'll get into some do's. So one of the chapters, it's relatively short in there. It talks about the reality showification. I don't know if that's a word, but it is now, there you go, of succession. And one of the things and I start it with with apologies to Mark Cuban and others, I hate Shark Tank. And I hate Shark Tank because, as someone who's been an entrepreneur and a startup guy and been part of that community, it has infected everything about the startup world. Well, I kind of see that happening in succession too. We start to kind of pit potential successors against each other and competing against each other, and oftentimes not just to see what they're made of, but often to exercise skill sets that are exactly the opposite of what we want them to exercise as good leaders of an organization. And one of my favorite examples of that was a company in the Midwest that had sons of two brothers who were both competing, in quotes, against each other, working these almost impossible jobs to stress test. And they neither one would opt out because they were worried about the business, but they were equally worried about the other person and the kind of Hatfields and McCoy's situation that was developing. Because when you have that, then you have teams, and now all of a sudden it's either I'm Team Bud or I'm Team Albert. And if Bud wins, now I hate Bud for the rest of my career. Or if Albert wins, all the Team Bud folks, like, they're not changing jerseys. Right. And so the first for predecessors is it's easy to think that a quote unquote competition is fair, and it's just not. It's testing the wrong skill sets. And if you don't know what you need, that means the predecessor didn't do enough work to figure out what the business needs. That's on the predecessor. That's not on the successor. All right. So that's kind of one from the predecessor standpoint. For all involved, a couple things I might recommend. Number one, as a successor, you're probably no Peach. So one of the things that's really tough, but you and I have had these conversations personally over the years, right? Like you and I, if we sat over a beer to talk about our respective successor situations, we would pick up the pitchfork for each other and go storm the castle for each other, right? And we're probably both wrong, but we think we're right. And that's why having really good non-connected external mentorship and coaching is huge in the process. Finding those external resources who can give it to you straight and say, look, you're being a jerk. There's a chapter in there about quicksand, because us, 80s and 90s kid, the two things we were most going to have to worry about is some random guy giving us drugs in the parking lot and quicksand. So, there are 8 types of quicksand that can get in our way as successors. So that's kind of avoid that stuff. But getting good coaching, having good mentorship, and then build a plan. So build a plan we can all agree to that has, and the key here is milestones, not deadlines. Because if you have something where you're staring at the clock, or the predecessor or the successor staring at the clock, it creates stress. Milestones are achievements that we can check off the list and say, these are indicators of performance, indicators of readiness, and we can all agree on those to make it a little less stressful and much more impactful as you're making that transition.
Love it. Started talking about with my family was, it's not about whether Bed's competent or capable, it's about timeline. And we've made it to that point. And then I know that I'm no Peach to work with. That's proven now. One of the ways that it's proven is that my dad magically no longer has sleep apnea, Albert.
Yeah.
That has gotten better since working with me, which I can take ownership for my pain in the assness nature as well.
Yeah. No, I love it.
So we haven't got any questions yet. Wanted to pitch that for folks.
I saw one pop up.
Okay.
So one got thrown up here about so much of this is built on relationships. How do you make sure that the predecessor is comfortable? Um, I'll start with you can't make the predecessor anything, right? So that's the hardest part is the predecessor's readiness is not your excuse. The only thing you can do is demonstrate that you're being emotionally intelligent enough that they can trust you with those relationships. So typically that means start small. So small introductions, having going on ride-alongs or whatever, or grabbing lunches or drinks afterward or whatever, and starting to build some of those social networks. But oftentimes, and I just kind of need to remind everybody, it's rarely that is more, if they're not transitioning relationships, that may not be the problem, that may be the symptom. So we may be thinking, oh, they don't trust me with relationships. No, they're grieving their exit and they don't quite know how this thing that they value, the relationship, can be transitioned yet. So I recommend if it's a family transition or it's a transition where you have a really good personal relationship with a predecessor, is talk to the person. One of the sparks that I talk about is what I refer to as everything the light touches. I looked for a different analogy for like 4 years. I couldn't find one. And it's that moment in Lion King when Papa Lion tells baby lion or the kid, like, one day everything the light touches will be yours. It's a Disney moment. It's a powerful moment. I don't know when the last time everyone on this call has seen Lion King. You remember the scene. It hits you emotionally, right? Well, that happens in every succession situation I've seen. At some point, someone says, this is going to be yours. The problem is there's no emotional moment in the transition after that that matches that. So when it doesn't feel that good anymore, there's a sense of discomfort. There's a sense of, oh, did I make the wrong decision? There's all this kind of heartburn that ends up coming after that moment happens. And so again, as the successor, understand that any action that doesn't look logical, comes out of nowhere, feels weird, feels wrong, is likely related to the emotional experience the predecessor's going through. And when someone is grieving, they don't do things that feel logical to someone who isn't feeling those emotions.
Yeah.
So just run it through that filter. You'll be able to understand better then how to act next.
Well, great stuff, Albert, today. Again, the book is Stepping Up Without Stepping in It. Incredible read. If you pick it up, you can find it on Amazon, right? And anywhere else books are sold.
Yep. We got hardback, paperback. We got it on audiobook. We got it on Kindle. We try to make it as available as possible for folks. The last thing I'll throw out, you'll see I have a complicated last name. I'm pretty infinitely Googleable. So shoot me an email if there's anyone who has any questions.
How can people find you, Albert? How can they get connected?
Yeah, so easiest way probably is get to us at solutions21.com. But again, Google me, LinkedIn, whatever, do whatever. I am more than happy to provide advice. I am an open book. I'll throw you parts of the book if there's something in there I think could be helpful to your challenge or situation, as you know. But I'm pretty easygoing that way, and just want it to be easier than the situations you and I got to struggle with earlier in our careers.
I love it. Well, awesome. Well, Albert, thanks for joining us today. You are the man. I really appreciate it. Great question from the audience, and you have a good rest of your day, and we'll be moving on to segment number 2.
Awesome. Enjoy the rest.
Thanks,
Take care.
Albert. See ya.